And I got 2 emails in August of last year asking for doctors and nurses to help Syrian refugees in Lebanon. And that's actually how I got into contact. I mean, I already was thinking in July of last year when I stood at the border of Israel and Lebanon and Israel and Syria, that I actually have a profession that is helpful for the people in Syria or the Syrian refugees. And I'm enjoying my time here in Tel Aviv University, but I could actually do something really useful and I'm not doing it. So I replied and I went to Lebanon.
So you're in Lebanon, you're at a refugee camp. Describe an average day.
We usually arrive at around 9 in the morning, and the camp leader would welcome us in his tent, which is usually the biggest and nicest tent of the refugee camp. And he would ask us to open up our mobile clinic, which is usually just a table and 2 chairs. We were in the Bekaa Valley where we were in refugee camps. We were 2 teams, so we had always 2 tables. And the refugees would come one after the other, tell us their complaints, their symptoms, and we would help them as much as we can. And if a certain exam was needed or when a certain operation was needed, we advised them to go to a local hospital. And usually each doctor saw approximately 70 to 80 patients, depending on the size of the camp, on the health issues people had. But we always had a coffee or a tea break at the camp itself. The refugees would bring us some coffee or tea, and that was their show of hospitality. So we were very overwhelmed by this. Yeah. And then in the evening, we went home. There we used to talk about what happened during the day, but usually we fell asleep quite quickly because it is physically and emotionally demanding, but in a good way.
Which cases stand out in your memory?
There is one case especially which stands out in my memory of a young girl. We were in the north of Lebanon, in the mountains, just close to the Syrian border. There was always a village elder who brought us to the different Syrian refugees. And one day he told us we should sit down at a concrete bench and wait for a family to come. And so a mother and her 2 daughters came. Her 9-year-old daughter had stomach ache, she was throwing up, she had diarrhea, and she was not eating well. So I checked her, but physically she was perfectly fine. So I started asking her where she likes it more, whether it is in Lebanon or in Syria. And of course she said she would like to be in Syria because there she has her friends, there she went to school. So I also started asking her what she saw on TV or also in real life. And then she told me she experienced that her neighbor was shot in front of her and her neighbor's blood spilled all over her. And since then she has these symptoms and she also can't sleep at night. She has bad dreams. And I asked her what she does. And she told me that she's talking to her mother, crying. So I said, this is already a very good start and she should keep on doing this because I cannot give her medication. Actually, she would need a psychologist to talk to her, but I just didn't have a psychologist next to me. During the whole time when the girl was telling me her story, she was very kind of absent, like she stared into the environment and she would not show any emotions. But then we gave her some pink boots. I mean, that's perfect for a little girl, pink color. And she was very happy about this. And the story behind the boots is actually, she only had sandals and the winter was coming. And so we thought it would be good for her to have boots. And the story behind the boots is that the coordinator is always responsible for getting into contact with the refugees and to coordinate everything. His daughter, who is also the same age as this girl, said, "Daddy, I have 2 pairs of boots. I actually only need 1. Take the second one, give it to a refugee child." So that was really heartwarming that already a child of 9 or 10 years old understands what it means to share in these kind of difficult situations.
And what about the way the Syrian refugees interacted with the Lebanese?
In the Bekaa Valley, I had the feeling they were quite well integrated because part of the Syrian refugees were seasonal workers already for a few years before, so they commuted between Lebanon and Syria. So it was usual to have Syrians around. And in the north, they still can communicate because they all speak Arabic. They share a lot of common values, common culture. But the thing is, we could not get so much into these details because we tried to leave politics outside in order also to build trust among the refugees, because a lot of them were also afraid that we are maybe from the regime and taking their names and sending them to Syria, and that might cause repercussions for the refugees' relatives. So that's why we did not ask too much about politics. If it came up, then we shortly talked about it, but really only shortly. So, but what we realized sometimes is that Lebanese doctors would treat the Syrian refugees in a different way than they treated their own people. Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, that was not the usual case, but we sometimes faced this.
What surprised you while you were there?
The happiness of the children, the joy of the children. If I look at the situation they were in, the dire situation, living in tents made up just of a wooden frame and tarps, and these tents being the size of, let's say, 15 square meters.